circle of Willis. What are the arterial supply of the brain or the cerebral cortex? The cerebral cortex is supplied by mostly the arterial collection known as circle of Willis. They are known as circle of Willis because they forms the circular appearance under the base of the brain, which supply brain. For example, that is formed by this is an circle of Willis. This is an circle. It forms an circular arc, because of which it is known as circle of Willis, which is an circulation, which is an important part of the circulation of the brain. This circle of Willis is mostly formed by three types of the arteries: anterior cerebral artery, middle cerebral artery, and the posterior cerebral artery. This can be formed. The circle of Willis can be easily formed by many steps. For example, in the first, we will make an circle known as circle of Willis. We will make an circle which represents the circle of Willis, and in second step we will draw W, which represents the posterior cerebral artery, and in third step we will draw I, which represents the middle cerebral artery. The outer part of the eye represents the middle cerebral artery. Then we draw 2I in the upper part, which represents the anterior cerebral artery, and we draw another I, which represents the internal carotid artery. The internal carotid artery lies in inner or the internal part of the circle, whereas the middle cerebral arteries lies in the outer part of the circle. The anterior communicating artery is anterior cerebral artery. Two anterior cerebral artery communicate with each other, forming the anterior cerebral communicating artery, and then there is another posterior communicating artery, posterior cerebral communicating artery, and in the base there is an basilar artery. This is an basilar artery. This all represents the circle of Willis, which supply the several part of the brain. Example: there is an circle of Willis supplying the brain, several parts of the brain. And now these three different main types of the arteries supplies several lobes of the brain, that is anterior cerebral artery, middle cerebral artery, and the posterior cerebral artery. Anterior cerebral artery, middle cerebral artery, and posterior cerebral artery. The posterior cerebral artery mostly supplies the occipital lobe, whereas the anterior cerebral artery mostly supply the frontal lobe. There is a middle cerebral artery, middle cerebral artery. This is middle cerebral artery supplies the lateral surface of brain, whereas the anterior cerebral artery mostly supplies the medial surface of the brain, whereas the posterior cerebral artery supplies the posterior part of the brain. And the clinical importance of these arteries are: when there is an thrombosis of this type of the thrombosis of artery, it may leads to phenomena known as hemiplegia. This is an pathological condition in which there is an paralysis of half surface of a body. That is, hemiplegia is a common condition. Hemiplegia is a common condition. It is an upper motor neuron type of the paralysis in one half of the brain, body, including the face. This is due to the obstruction of a blood supply due to the thrombosis. Obstruction of the blood supply due to the thrombosis, mostly in the middle cerebral artery. This is a figure of hemiplegia in which there is a paralysis of one side of a body. So this is known as hemiplegia. Hemi means half, and the plegia means paralysis, similar like paralysis, that is weakness.